agenda, we have Anne first. So take it away, Anne.
No worries, Judith, everybody. My name is Anne Cartney, for those who don't know me, but I feel like I know most of the faces here at this point, thankfully. A little bit about me for the folks that have not met me before. So I am Irish. I grew up on a small rural farmland up on the border of North and South of Ireland. And yeah, I guess that's where my love of biodiversity really started on that farm. So I'm very grateful for that place, for that space. I did my undergraduate in Dublin City University in genetics and cell biology. And I went on to do my PhD there also in the lab of Dr. Mary O'Connell and Professor James McInerney, working on comparative genomics and mathematical networks. At that point, I realized how frustrated I was with the data at the time. I wasn't able to really explore the evolutionary questions that I wanted to ask because the genome assemblies for primates at that time were quite poor. And so that was really debilitating my research. And that's why I got really into, and, as most bioinformaticians get, quite controlling of their data quality. I wanted to explore how to create my own genome assemblies. So I took my first postdoc in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I had the wonderful opportunity to sequence their endemic and endangered flora and fauna, but also the flora and fauna that are culturally salient to their indigenous peoples, the Maori. So I really that was a really wonderful training experience for me to build genomics pipelines that were in alignment with the values, rights, and interests of indigenous peoples. And so I spent 2 years there, and I assembled many fungi, arthropods, and they're an endemic tree species, and I did some PopGen work on that tree species as well when I was there. But one of the parts, another frustration that popped up was that I was working on arthropods at the time with very low coverage ONT data, and these were arthropods that were in hybrid zones. And so incredibly difficult to generate any type of high quality assembly from them. And so with that frustration, I said, okay, I need to learn how to build an assembler that will deal with non-model species like the stick insects that I was assembling at the time. So I moved to the NHGRI to work with Dr. Adam Filippi and Arang Ri and Sergei Koren and Sergei Nurk at the time. And there we started to work on generating T2T genome assemblies. And that was in the human context, but my real passion projects were biodiversity, of course. So I wanted to use those skills to be able to transfer over to that. But during that time, two wonderful things happened. I realized that really what I started to value a lot was understanding the bioethics behind what was going on, and also how to engage with policymakers on the importance of genomics. So I took many trainings I worked in the Office of Science Policy and the National Institute of Health for a period of time. And I also took some bioethics training whilst I was there as well. So continuing to engage with the topic of Indigenous data sovereignty and those types of issues, but many other issues also. The other thing that happened during that time was that ERGA started, which was wonderful. That was 2021, and that was really the offset of ERGA. And that's when the ERGA pilot, I started to coordinate the ERGA pilot project along with Alice Mouton and Giulio Fermenti and a wonderful group of piloteers, we now call them, call everybody involved in our pilot project. So 2 years after from the NHGRI, I then moved just 1 year ago into the Redwoods in California in the University of California in Santa Cruz, where I work in the Genomics Institute. And so whilst here, I've been really working on the EBP Justice, Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Committee, but also just elected along with Mark Blackster to the EBP Executive Council. And so we've been doing work there. So I've been asked to so that's a bit of a rundown of who is Anne, starting from the fields of Ireland into the redwoods of California. But what motivated me most about it to become the vice chair, God, Rob, I'm not taking your role. It's all yours. So there is an old Maori proverb that states, "What is the most important thing in the world? The people, the people, the people." This proverb eloquently describes why I'm thrilled to have been elected into the position of Vice Chair of ERGA and work as part of the executive board team over the next 3 years. I can still remember my first engagement with ERGA. In the midst of lockdown, logging in from my tiny apartment a mile away from the White House in Washington, D.C. I remember sitting and watching as the participant numbers increased and increased, and I was so in awe with as each the Zoom window, each of the screens started to become smaller and smaller to make space for other eager biodiversity researchers. At the start of that meeting, we entered as singular threads with a shared appreciation for what biodiversity genomics could achieve. By its end, those singular threads had become interwoven to become the fabric of what now is the community that upholds ERGA. For me, our undeniable strength is reliant on the values of the people that have and continue to contribute to the weaving, expanding, and shaping of ERGA's fabric. Over the years, I have had the honor of engaging with ERGA's vast member base, experiencing many intersections of diversity, including geographical, linguistic, social, political, and economical, to name but a few. Although diverse, what we share is much greater. Our values and what we share is our values. Our values including respect, commitment, loyalty, justice, and resiliency. These are the values that unify ERGA, and it is these values that motivate me to continue the work we all started in that very first meeting. My jack of all trades nature and expert of none allows me to traverse epistemologically distinct disciplines to link the technical streamlined production of reference genome production with the challenging ethical, legal, and social issues. It also allows me to effectively communicate with policymakers to prioritize funding for reference genomes. And lastly, it allows me to think thoughtfully about how justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion can be embedded into all ERGA's policies, practices, and events. As I opened with a Maori proverb, it's only right that I close with an Irish one, and that is Ninyart Gekor Lekela, meaning there is no strength without unity. What motivates me most about becoming vice chair is committing to unifying our community as we continue on our shared journey to create the books of life for each species, providing the world with a more complete story of the Earth's biodiversity. So that's a little bit of an introduction to me, and I guess I'll throw it over to Chiara for her introduction.